There's more to a game's story than the dialogue and actions that occur on screen. Whether you realize it or not, the environment of the game lends a hand to inform you about the game's setting, the characters present, or the conflict that is happening. Everything from bullet-pocketed holes to indicate a hostile area, overgrowth of plant life in an urban setting showing society's decay, or the promise of utopia being advertised well after the place has gone to shit. For generations of gaming, the background was of no importance, but as storytelling itself became more mainstream in video games, so did the use of environmental storytelling. Game changers on environmental design like BioShock, Metro 2033, Fallout 3, and The Last of Us all directed a new path to gaming. A whole genre of games became more popular based on this focus on environmental storytelling. Walking simulators, but they are far from the only type of game that benefited from this. Carefully designed environments make the world feel real, more relatable, and by effect make the player more immersed into the story or the tale being told. In 2019, A Plague Tale: Innocence was released by French game developers Asobo Studios. It's a stealth action game taking place in 14th century France at a wonderful place in time where the 100 Years' War, the Holy Inquisition, and the Black Death all cross paths. The story follows Amicia de Rune and her younger brother Hugo, children of noble descent. Hugo has been sick from birth and their mother Beatrice is an alchemist who has been treating the boy in isolation. So Amicia is pretty much a stranger to her brother Hugo. The game starts with Amicia on a hunting trip with her father and her dog. That trip is quickly ended as her dog is mutilated by something mysterious in the woods, and killing off the family dog is probably the most tame thing that happens in this game. After returning home, the Inquisition invades the de Rune estate, killing Amicia's father and mother, leaving Amicia and Hugo on the run. The game's theme revolves around innocence, and as the title suggests, Amicia is a young, sheltered girl of noble descent. She may be aware that the war is happening, but it's not something that she's affected by, and Hugo hasn't left his room since he was born. These two are now thrown against the world in the middle of all these factors that are happening, and they are forced to survive. The destruction of innocence is what drives this game. As the children move from place to place, there are constant threats of the Inquisition, English soldiers, and plague-ridden rats, and even the villagers are scared and angry. Amicia is forced to not only witness the brutality of these times, but also partake, using her sling to take the lives of any threat coming her way by either slinging a rock into their head or destroying the only barrier that they have between themselves and the rats. There's even a point where she lures a pig into a closed area to have the rats devour it so that they can use that as a distraction to get by them. A Plague Tale is honestly one of the best titles I've played in recent memory, and as I played through, it's because it excels in two things I value most in gaming: atmosphere and immersion.
We have no choice, Hugo! We have to get the rats away!
Mummy used to say that monsters are just those things too.
Just those things to which we have never given a name. She told me that too.
I would quite like to see a monster, actually.
Like some of the games mentioned earlier, BioShock, Metro 2033, or The Last of Us, A Plague Tale: Innocence is a linear narrative game, which, no matter the gameplay, is my favorite style of game. A game that controls the direction that the story goes. A game that guides you through the adventure, keeping you completely immersed in the then and now. Games that limit the areas you're in at one time usually have the benefit of an incredibly rich and detailed environment, and this game is no outlier to that. The French production house Asobo Studios worked technically on site during development. Being in the southwest of France themselves, they used real historical references and real locations to lend to this amazing rendition of 14th century France seen in the game. Some of the environmental storytelling is just superb throughout the game. The level of detail just lends so much to what the story is trying to give. At the start of the game, you're walking through the woods with your father and your dog. This is one of the few times this game is vibrant and cheerful. There are no worries between the characters. It's just a wholesome trip, doubling as a tutorial for the player, teaching the basics of the sling, playing and how stealth works in this game, but also an emotional tutorial. This peaceful event is ended as Amicia chases her dog trailing a bleeding pig, seeing this forest slowly decay into darkness and finding the dog clinging onto life before being devoured. As Amicia returns to her estate, you hear chatter of the craftsmen talking about riveting doors due to the approaching English troops. Livestock is being prepared so food is available. All Amicia cares about though is her dog dying. You as the player can acknowledge these chatters and actions in the background, or you can just run straight to the house and see her mother. After escaping the estate from the Inquisition, Amicia and Hugo end up downriver at another village. It initially seems vacant. There's rotten fruit and vegetables lying in the market. Amicia spots a large billow of smoke and assumes that there are a lot of people gathered there. And Hugo smells meat cooking, so he thinks it's a fair or something. Some people scatter from the streets into their homes at the sight of the children, seeming almost scared of them. And as Amicia pounds on their door saying that she's the daughter of Robert de Rune, she's shocked that they ignore her. Some of them even yell at her to get away. She knows that there's a sickness going around as she explains what the large X's painted on the doors mean to Hugo, meaning that there's sick people inside. But she doesn't seem to realize the extent of the plague or how scared people have become of it. This distraught village and the scared people that live there explain to both Amicia and the player that this sickness is in full effect. This village just downstream from the de Rune estate is fully contaminated, and Amicia had no idea. As you continue to walk through this village, you find the fair that Hugo thought was going on. It turns out to be a group of scared and angry villagers burning people alive, the people that they think are responsible for this plague. They turn to the children and they accuse them as well, saying that their music brought on the vermin that bites the children in their sleep. They start to chase Amicia and Hugo, and as you run and hide, you hear some villagers explaining the main guy leading this angry group of villagers, he went mad after his kids died to the plague, and they are aware that he is burning these innocent people. These villagers are just scared. They're not evil. They are just following the person that took the role of leader because they didn't want to run the risk of being killed themselves. Later on, Hugo runs away from Amicia, and as you chase him, the city becomes more in ruins. Carts and doors are destroyed. Dead bodies are laid out in the street, either murdered or taken from the plague. This all comes to a climax as Amicia is forced to kill a man trying to hurt Hugo. The game seems to stop for a moment. The music changes and the emotions of Amicia are portrayed beautifully to the player. Amicia, this sheltered, privileged girl, just killed a man. This trend of terrible events continues to compound as Amicia and Hugo continue through the church. They find the father of the church and almost feel saved at a friendly face until the introduction of the rats. They devour the father down to the bone in seconds, and Amicia and Hugo are again on a fight for survival from a whole new enemy. After escaping the rats, they collapse outside, Amicia exhausted and crying, saying "we did it" over and over again, sounding relieved they survived, but slowly realizing what they just survived and realizing it's just the beginning and they are nowhere near their destination. These environmental cues continue on throughout the whole game. They are a strong focus of the developer as the theme of innocence is portrayed often through them as well. As you come across unique flowers in the game, Hugo will sprint over to them, explain what they are, and pluck them to place in Amicia's hair. It's assumed that Hugo has this knowledge because of all the time he spent with his alchemist mother. Hugo also loves seeing bubbles off the dock connected to a village that's full of dead people. After coming across some pigs, Hugo tells them to run and hide as the English are coming. After getting out of the river, he's worried that his mother will be upset that his clothes are wet. The tale of innocence just comes across constantly, both directly in the story and throughout the environment. It's not all just the arrangement of scenery that drives this environmental storytelling in games. There are two things in this game that I think exemplifies this immersion: the music and the graphics. Graphically, this game may be one of the best looking games that I've played. It's absolutely beautiful. The animations, the environments, the textures, the lighting and particle effects are all spectacular. It lends to make this linear game not feel so linear. Yes, you know there's a path that needs to be followed, but there are no hard edges to it. In fact, there are open borders that facilitate roaming around, and the quality of textures don't diminish as you leave the beaten path. The arrival of rats is mind-blowing because there are seemingly thousands of rats on screen at the same time, and you can see each rat doing little independent things and motions. It's amazing how much quality there is. The part early on where Amicia and Hugo just get out of the river, look at their clothes. I've never seen wet clothes that look this good in a game. It's just little things like this that add so much. There isn't much else to say other than the level of detail to graphics lend tremendously to this immersion of the game. The music is just as important as the graphics, if not more, to portray the emotions and the immersion. Oliver Deravere is a genius, mastering the emotions through music in many games. I feel like A Plague Tale is one of the few games where I had to stop what I was doing because the music was just insane. The level where you come across the castle and the lightning strikes with music cues was just...
Nelly,
here.
need a little help here. On my way. Come on! I'm starting to get fed up of all these doors.
Look! We found it! The castle!
Whoa. It really exists. Chateau d'Ambrage. It's amazing.
I had a moment of doubt, but that's the sort of alchemist legend I like. Come on, let's take a closer look.
That's me stopping and thinking, what the fuck? That scene hits so damn hard. These cues continue to happen as lightning strikes incorporate into a game mechanic using lightning to avoid the rats. It's just brilliant. The intense music of these Uncharted-esque chase sequences set the tone perfectly just as well as the more calm moments. The calm moments are important because yes, they are calm, but they add this somber and melancholy feeling because everyone knows that the threats have not ended. You just get a little breather. And the music just portrays all this perfectly. A Plague Tale: Innocence is one of the most brutal and devastating games that I've played in a while. Taking place in possibly the worst time in history for France, it sandwiches the 100 Years' War, the Holy Inquisition, and the Black Plague on top of 2 young children. The theme of innocence is brilliantly portrayed throughout the game between both Amicia and Hugo, but the thing that I took away most from this game is the insane level of detail to the environment. Using the environment to enhance the story to give as many answers as it does additional questions, and I think when games achieve this properly, the ability to become immersed in the story is there, and for me that is the most important thing to make a game impactful, to make a game memorable, and I will certainly not forget A Plague Tale: Innocence anytime soon. Thanks for taking the time to watch this. I hope you enjoyed it. See ya.